rocks around the Billy Squire, big beat, pound wow, rocks around the Billy Squire, big beat, pound wow, rocks around the Billy Squire, big beat, pound wow, rocks around the Billy Squire, big beat, pound wow, big beat.
Alrighty then. How's it going? How you doing?
I'm good. I have just had a lovely bank holiday. I went to Carney.
Oh,
I saw Tame Impala.
oh,
I feel like it's been. I was gonna say it's been chocker, but actually they're the two main things. But it's still they felt noticeable.
they're two big things though. To be fair,
Yeah, they are. They're big enough.
two chunky things. Start with Carnival? How was Carnival?
It was incredible. I went on the Sunday, which is supposedly the family day. There's a family day and an adult day, but I mean there were children there, but I would say it was still very much adults. I'm not sure there's that much of a difference, to be honest, between the 2 days. It's kind of a way of, I suppose, just sort of giving a gesture of this day is going to be vaguely more chill, I suppose. But it was just incredible. I think really the thing that took me back was just the sheer scale of it. It's huge. It's just massive. Like my flatmate was telling me it's 2 square miles, I think. And we'd also read that I think it was over the course of the weekend, 2 million people were expected to have been there.
Hell.
Which is bigger than the population of any of the other cities in this country.
And that's just people attending. That's mental.
Yeah. Suddenly the 2 square miles seems quite small at that point to accommodate.
You're all in there
all these
like
people.
Sardines.
Yeah, it was definitely packed at certain points, but it's still kind of spread out in other areas, you know, so it wasn't hellishly packed, I wouldn't say, which is the other kind of remarkable thing about it, considering, you know, you do still have a sense of there's a lot of people there, but yeah, not to the extent that it just stops becoming enjoyable.
You want to kind of explain what it is to anyone who might not know?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it really, but Notting Hill Carnival, it is apparently also the biggest carnival in Europe. That's another fact about it.
Nice.
And it's in Notting Hill, which is now just a really fancy area of Hugh Grant fame. Awesome. Richard Curtis vibes. But
which is quite on topic for today's conversation, actually, but we'll come back to that.
Interesting. Okay, because I don't know how. Am I supposed to know how that links?
No. That's just gonna very loosely relate to a point I'm gonna make later.
Interesting. Okay, good. I thought I had got completely the wrong album then for a second, or something like that. Yeah, but I think Notting Hill used to be sort of an area with a lot more sort of immigration, and I think a lot of the sort of buildings that are now really fancy were kind of a lot more run down. I guess it's kind of one of the original areas of gentrification in that sense. But yeah, it still retains the sort of carnival that started from way back then in like the 60s, I think. And it's huge. It's insane. There's apparently over 30 sound systems there. For most of it, we were just walking along the main street, Portobello Road, and there's just a kind of procession of different sound systems on trucks, essentially. And so it's almost like they're actively competing against one another because none of them have a geographical advantage, or at least not for any sustained period of time. It all has to be about the music, so people will follow sound systems or whatever else. And then down the sort of side streets, they have sort of more established little stages. Often, I think radios will have their own stages, although we only saw one of them. So I think actually it felt massive, but I think I only saw a small part of it in the grand scheme of things.
That sounds incredible.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's something I would love to do. I was aiming to come down this year, but like with train prices and everything, and with it being so kind of like last minute to try and book something, it was a little bit too much of a squeeze on the wallet. But I think I'm gonna like make an effort to kind of have it in the diary for next year and come experience it.
It's a good shout. I think next year, so presuming obviously that I'm going to be in London. I think I'll be doing it again, even if I'm not. I'd be trying to get
popping
it.
over,
Probably.
yeah.
It was an experience, and I'm sure that it's kind of never the same once. So. Or never the same twice. What am I trying to say there? That is the other thing about this. After this weekend, I feel like my brain is not 100%. I feel like it's surprisingly okay, but still not 100%.
I feel like that's what my brain's like all the time, to be honest.
Yeah, to be honest, actually, maybe that's the concerning thing, that actually this just doesn't feel that.
This is just how it is. Was there any particular standout experiences from the carnival? Was there anything like any food you ate that was particularly like wow, or any music that was particularly like grabbing your attention, or was it just like the whole thing?
It was the whole thing, really. I mean, we weren't there for a crazy long amount of time, although we were there for longer than we'd intended in the end. It must have been a good sort of, I don't know, sort of 4 hours or something like that, maybe more.
Oh wow.
Yeah, actually, I think so. Thinking about it in retrospect, the time passed kind of really quickly, and I think we ended up there longer than we'd intended. But we were only really intending basically to go for a couple of hours, just to
kind
see
of
it.
Nosy around and.
Yeah, Hannah had been a hen do the night before, so couldn't make it.
Understandable.
Very understandable. But it was really more just the full experience. I guess the other thing that struck me was just I've never experienced bass like that. I mean, bass that shakes the whole street, you know, and your body shakes along with it.
Your teeth are chattering.
Yeah. And I was also kind of pleased to see that you got people sort of sitting out on balconies and stuff like that. So there were some local people basically enjoying it, unless it was just that people Airbnb out their flats, which is also very plausible. But I think I appreciated that just because I've heard a lot of a bit more depressing things about it. Like, so having just talked about the sort of gentrification of the area, there's then this whole thing where all of the locals absolutely hate Carnival because it's all these people, you know, more well-off people, more affluent people now who have swooped in, and so they all bugger off to, I don't know, the second home in Cornwall or whatever they have. And so then the actual area itself is kind of emptied of any of the locals, but it didn't quite feel like that, basically, which is what I'd been fearing it would feel like that, but it wasn't quite like that. So that was kind of nice to see. But yeah, I do think that's a sort of depressing edge to it, and I'm obviously giving quite a one-sided and I'm sure overly simplistic kind of view on it, but there is this sort of...
It's very much like the visiting. I don't want to say tourist, because obviously you are a Londoner now, but it's just something like the Notting Hill Carnival. It is almost like a tourist vision of it, because you're just popping your head in for 4 hours, seeing, like, catching the vibe of it.
It is, but it is also such a it was historically a local thing, I suppose. It started as a bit more of a spontaneous local thing, and obviously lots of time has passed since then, and it's sort of grown on a scale that I'm sure brings all sorts of complications and all sorts of concerns. But it does feel like a shame when an area becomes kind of completely changed, and then those people who have completely changed it, who, like, I mean, the whole process of gentrification often happens because people are drawn to an area. In part, it's just, I guess it starts with students and sort of young people who are drawn there because it's cheap often, but there's also that added element that people are drawn there because there's often a sort of a vibrancy, there's a sort of sense of bustling nature to an area, and the process of gentrification kind of sucks all of that dry often. And again, remaining very one-sided, some of the people now saying, oh, Carnival should stop, or we don't like it, we don't like all of this going on in our area, are kind of like that final stage in that long process. And so maybe you can't ascribe individual blame to that. As Sam's noted before, it's kind of more structural than that. It's about how we provide housing and all of that kind of thing. But at the same time, can't help but slightly resent the people who do represent that final
Yeah.
part of the process. And that's it for politics. Actually, it's not, because that's part of my hot take later on.
Ooh, juicy.
Inevitably, my hot take has some tangential politics in it, even though this isn't supposed to be a politics podcast. It is light and fun.
You're quickly taking it over to be a political podcast. Every episode, you just bringing it down on us, whether we like it or not.
It's because the spin-off podcast just did so poorly.
You need to capture this very limited audience.
Yeah, despite heavy publicizing for the spin-offs, just nothing, guys. Where were you?
How was Tame Impala, or Tame Impala?
Also amazing,
as one of my friends likes to call him for some reason.
Yeah, my guy Tame Impala was amazing. It's sort of a little bit hazy, but not overly so. And yeah, what an experience! I think my dad, so when I told him I'd been shared a Guardian article, of course, sort of reviewing the performance, and it sort of described it as like a sort of marrying of 60s psychedelia and 90s club culture, which I think is actually quite a good description for it. It was a spectacle. It was an experience. It was done to sort of make you feel euphoria and dance, I suppose, which I appreciate. It was basically everything in many ways that I expected. In fact, Hannah's mate Anna, because we talked about this beforehand, and we'd sort of, I think we maybe even talked about sort of Tame Impala before we even, seeing Tame Impala live before this show had even been announced. I can't really remember, but I think she said at one point, it's as we expected, or something like that. But not in an underwhelming way, as in a sheer sense of like how overwhelming it was, that it kind of did everything that we'd hoped it would. And yeah, I think mainly what that was about it being an experience. I think sometimes I can find live performances can become a bit of a cold, sort of like an exhibition of, here are the songs that you know and love. Sing along to them if you like. And so even if there's like an impassioned sort of singer and all of that kind of stuff, the experience as a whole is nothing more than that. It's nothing more than an opportunity for people to go along and see the person in person. There's a weird kind of hero worshipy aspect to that. See the person in person and sing along to songs that they like. And not to knock that entirely, but that has diminishing returns, I think, sometimes. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you want something more than that. You want it to be an experience. You want it to do what music should do, which is sort of make you dance, feel, whatever else. It should be a sort of a more visceral experience than just being able to have said that you've seen the artist that you wanted to see.
I'd say this is like the most intoxicating review of a live music experience I've ever listened to. Like, I am now very keen to go see Tame Impala based on this review. You've done a lot better than most publications do when they talk about live music. I'm sold. I'm in.
Well, yeah. If you needed selling, then there you go. Tame Impala, would recommend.
Where was he performing?
Well, it was actually, this is the one thing I can give just to make it sound balanced, I can give a caveat here. This is the one thing that lets it down a little bit. It was at All Points East, which is sort of a festival in Victoria Park. It's over 2 weekends, so it's a really big kind of day festival thing.
Oh, fucking hell.
And they get all sorts of artists from all sorts of genres. It's amazing, but obviously like each day tends to collect around a certain genre.
Yeah.
But the only problem is that day festivals are always such a letdown in terms of sound quality.
Oh, they absolutely are.
Worse than the open stages, especially, are just. I mean, people were chanting actually at a couple of points, sort of turn it up.
Yeah.
Which I felt bad for, because poor Kevin couldn't really do much about that.
He can't do it. Yeah, it's all about how it's set up beforehand. He's not just got like a dial that he can spin.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry guys.
Exactly, yeah.
A bit low.
Yeah. It's not like he was just messing with the audience, but I mean, like, I'm sure he's dealt with sort of more rowdy audiences, or as rowdy audiences in Australia. It was a very kind of sort of British response, I suppose. But aside from that caveat, it was incredible. And I knew that was going to happen. We'd had it Were you there at Foals last year? We saw Foals at All Points East.
I've not done All Points East.
No, okay, yeah. Well, we saw Foals at All Points East last year, and it was exactly the same experience. But I'd say that was much more underwhelming because people were moshing everywhere. But then Foals were a really muted kind of sound. Again, not particularly through fault of their own. Although I would say that Foals,
they're not a moshable band to begin with. Really,
they can be. They've got some of those really high energy songs. I don't know exactly what it.
I feel like they're more high energy dancing than moshing though. I can't think of a full song that I could mosh to. I can't think of a full song that I could like rugby tackle someone to the ground to. You know?
Well, it's even more surreal when somebody's rugby tackling you to the ground, and then it sounds like your mate has their tinny speaker with Foals on in the background. Mild exaggeration, but yeah. it was a slightly surreal experience. Whereas I don't know whether this was louder at Tame Impala, but it definitely works better. Also, interesting point to note, just there's got to be some kind of science in this. I think it must be to do with the bodies soaking up the sound as well as like sound limits and stuff, because it was actually better sound. We sort of halfway through moved to the outskirts of the audience and the sound quality improved, I think.
Right, okay, yeah.
And maybe it's just because you don't have less muttering around you as well, I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of interesting.
Was it like a big crowd then? Like, was it just absolutely full? Like,
it was pretty rammed. I mean, everybody was there to see Tame Impala, I guess. I don't even know whether anybody was. I don't think anybody was playing at the same time. There might have been I don't think there was.
I'd feel bad for anyone if there was.
No, I mean, it was essentially like it was almost like just a gig for Tame Impala. I think plausibly people would pay the same amount just to see Tame Impala, and I think it was his only performance in the UK this year. I think I'm right in saying that.
Did you see anyone else while you were there?
Yeah, I think some of the others are maybe hazier in some ways. I saw Caribou, who I've seen before, but who's always really good live. And I've got to get this. Let me check the lineup again because Caroline Polachek, that's it. Caroline Polachek. Okay. Who I hadn't heard of, but I think she's blown up recently. I've not heard of her. Potentially a TikTok kind of blown up kind of star.
Should we just claim confidently that she's a TikTok star without having any context or research?
Yeah, I'll just claim it.
Definitely a TikTok star.
Famous TikTok star Caroline Polachek. And so I also saw dry cleaning, so a little bit of I sort of dragged people along to who are a little bit like Wet Leg, I suppose. Monotonous female vocal over post-punk backing, I suppose.
I wouldn't call Wet Leg monotonous.
Yeah, no, the vocals like almost intentionally, knowingly sort of monotonous, I'd say so. It's kind of like it's this sort of like everything sounds like it's a dry, sarcastic comment, you know?
Yeah, I'd go with that, but I feel monotonous is a bit unfair. It's not like monotone, is it? She does have variation in her vocals.
I suppose so. I wouldn't say it's particularly emotive. I'm not saying this is a criticism either. I'd say like as in, I mean, it's certainly in the case of dry cleaning, she looked almost bored or confused to be there. But that was kind of part of the stage presence.
That's part of the energy.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
The character on stage.
I'm not sure anybody that I was there with did. We saw a band called Blaze as well, or The Blaze, who we'd never heard of, but we were recommended, sort of synth pop band, and yeah, they seemed really good. To be fair, they kind of put on a decent show. They were in a tent as well, so it always helps with the sound quality.
Yeah, I think seeing someone in a tent, it always improves the experience. Just if anything, just being kind of trapped in that environment together with everyone, like you're closer to everyone and everything. You know, the sounds bouncing off the insides of the tent. It's just a bit more of an intimate experience. As soon as you're outside, you kind of lose that intimacy, which is what makes gigs feel so special. So
yeah, a bit more atmosphere.
Yeah. Festivals are a great way to get like value for money, but they're never the best way to see like the best bands that you want to see. Like if you're there like, I'm going to tick off 5 artists I really want to see, perfect. But if you're there like, I actually really, really want to see, I don't know, the weekend, you're better off going to a weekend concert because it's like all about the weekend.
Nah, so true. I mean, like it's got to be at the end of the day. Over time, I've just increasingly realized it's got to be about, again, this word again, the experience. I suppose you got to just sort of embrace that whole festival vibe, and there is something to that.
Yeah, you got to know what you're getting in for, and then enjoy it for what it is, and like do the things that are unique to that.
Exactly. Yeah. And day festivals, I've decided increasingly are the way to go. I'm always the Grinch when it comes to festivals, but I don't mind day festivals so much.
Are you not a fan of the camping?
Not massively. I've got to figure out whether I'm gonna try and do Glastonbury, I guess, and stuff like that, or try for Glastonbury.
Yeah.
Hannah's definitely very tempted, but
I think I'm doing Glastonbury.
Are you?
Yeah, Alex messaged me and was like trying to get a little group together for Glastonbury. I don't know if he's done the same with you.
Yeah, no, he has, and I'm kind of not super. No, I'm not. No, I am. What am I saying here? I'm.
Does doing this podcast mean that you have to do it though? For the content. Imagine the episode we could do.
Do you reckon we can get a press pass?
we could try.
We need to get my dad on board.
Yes. Get him doing
my dad was trying to be our media manager.
Yeah. We'll get him on board just to get us into Glastonbury for free. I don't know if we need to do anything with the press pass. Can we just hang out? I don't know the ins and outs.
If we got a press pass, I would happily do stuff. I mean, the stuff that we'd get to do would presumably be quite cool. We might get to interview people. Yeah, if anybody wants to sort this out for us, that would be greatly appreciated.
Our unique selling points are having about 9 listeners. That's a huge reach, huge audience.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of potential to promote you as an artist, and I know Glastonbury's kind of on the smaller scale of things, so I'm sure an extra 9 people turning up would be a big help. So that's my pitch.
Yeah,
I think I might need to work on it a little bit.
Famously struggling festival.
Cool. Oh, I'm glad you've had such a full, exciting bank holiday. In comparison, I've not done anything, so I'm glad that you had quite a lot of funny experiences to talk about, because I ended up just...
Has it been a good kind of not doing anything? Has it been a nice, relaxed, recharging?
It was a nice, relaxed doing nothing. It was actively deciding. My next bunch of weekends coming up are all full, basically. So I was and my last couple of weekends have all been full. So I was like, I'm going to take this opportunity to have basically a do nothing weekend. And I mean, I still went round to people's houses to watch some films and went out for dinner and stuff like that. But it was very kind of, relaxed stuff, and then just played some video games with the boys and some of the girls. And yeah, that was it basically. Just very chill and needed. But I think there was a point on Monday where I was like, okay, I'm ready to I've had my downtime now. I'm now ready to fill my weekends up again, which is good because we've got London, seeing you and the gang next weekend.
Yeah.
And then I'm in something I need to talk to you about actually. I'm on holiday the weekend after, and then for a week, which is when we'd usually be recording.
Sure.
So instead of doing another episode that week or pushing it back or anything, I was thinking we could maybe come up with some ideas for a mini-sode or something where we just talk about I don't know, a few songs that we've been enjoying recently or something, and just fit that in at some point before I go away, and then we can release that just as a filler kind of thing, a shorter episode, half an hour thing. How does that sound? I
think that's not a bad shout. We've been talking about wanting to do song of the week or things like that. So maybe we can just use that as an opportunity to, or maybe sort of talk about talk about some of our broader musical trends or something, oh, here's what I've been getting into lately.
Yeah.
Or whatever else it might be.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be ideal.
That sounds good.
And then having those kind of things on the back burner for when there's a week where you're away or I'm away and we don't have to worry about trying to squeeze it in. We can just pop a little mini-sode in.
God, you're bloody organised, Louis.
I've got to be so busy, so full of life. No, life is full. Because as soon as we're back from holiday, then it's London again for Charlie's thing, and then Cambridge, and then Edinburgh. I'm going all over the place. So this weekend was a much needed breather, but I'm over it now and I'm ready for more.
That sounds pretty perfect. Yeah, that's you kind of need those recharging points. That's what I'm treating. It's not a whole weekend of it, but I'm trying to treat tonight after this podcast as a bit of like a self-care night.
Nice. I'm sorry we're eating into your self-care night. I hope that talking about Parklife by Blur counts as self-care in some regard.
This is my solidifying my brain after mush period.
Okay, good.
So it's actually all part of that as well, because I've got to present a meeting tomorrow.
Ooh.
So I'm almost treating this as well as making sure that my brain is still ticking to some extent.
I like that.
More of something else entirely.
So, as usual, I'll give a little introduction, but I feel like I don't really have a big introduction because usually kind of like the points I'd list off, the kind of like Wikipedia summary, I feel they all kind of spiral into other things I want to talk about. So I'll just say that to this week's album, I'm about to burp, I can feel it coming. So if it just comes out at some point, I'm sorry. But how good would that be if there was an album titled that as well? Oh man. Anyway, this week's album is Parklife by Blur, which was released in 1994. So the reason it was chosen is because last episode's album was released in 1995, I think, very close to this album. And they were both hugely popular, and yet they both represent very disparate aspects of British society and pop culture and just the general mood of the 90s. So it's kind of, this is like a sister episode to last episode. So if you haven't listened to last episode, maybe go give that one a listen as well. Oh, I see that little tie connection there. But another reason I chose
again, the
Parklife
organisation
is this is all coming off the dome. It's not organized, but another reason I chose this album is because this is one of the earliest albums I can remember listening to, like, full stop. And in that regard, I think it is fairly formative to some extent to my kind of musical upbringing, if you want to use that. I have quite a lot of like childhood memories associated with this one, so I think I wanted to kind of hit on it from that aspect. And then also I think it's a pretty good album. I think it's a bit of a classic. So that's my kind of intro, and then I'll flip it over to you and I'll ask you what your connection to the album was, because I think this is one you've heard before but not for a while. Where do you sit with Blur's Parklife?
Yeah, like you say, I have listened to it before, but yeah, it's been a really long time, and I suppose like almost everybody, at least growing up in the UK, I almost can't remember a time that I wasn't aware of the whole Blur Oasis thing, like kind of rivalry. Maybe that's more.
We're jumping straight into it.
Yeah, well, that's just probably the context that I think, it's all part of that Britpop rivalry. That kind of like is how I'd think of them. And I think maybe especially sort of coming from the north, it was always like, it's Oasis, and then it's like, oh yeah, and Oasis are better than Blur, or whatever else it might be, or vice versa. Although interestingly, my dad's also from Colchester, so that's kind of like and Damon Albarn's from just outside Colchester. I was trying to check this because I'd always thought of them as a Colchester band, but I think they're a London band, but there is a link to Colchester there somewhere. So I was kind of aware of them like everybody else, just through cultural osmosis, if you can call it that.
Yeah.
Parklife is obviously our unofficial national anthem, or certainly one of them. That is,
yes, it is
just an incredible
one of them.
tune.
I would say it's one of them because there are so fucking many. But
there are.
It is definitely up there.
But it does feel like it embodies a lot somehow. So that was probably the first song I knew from this album specifically. And then I remember getting really into Girls and Boys, the tune, just at the end of sixth form and then going into uni. And listening to it again is really interesting. I actually think it does embody a lot of my taste in music as well. Maybe in a similar way to like what you were saying about this album, that it's kind of like got a sort of influential side. I don't know whether this album had the same influence on me, but sort of my love of some songs does reflect a kind of broader sort of cross genre interest. So like Girls and Boys, I suppose I was always quite into that sort of dancey side of indie. So even when I was kind of like I wouldn't say I was exclusively like an indie kid, but like back in school I'd have been more pigeonholed into sort of indie side.
I think sixth form was very much the time. School and sixth form was very much the time of being into indie. I think everybody was in some way.
It felt like a pervasive.
And if you weren't, you were like aggressively not into indie. It was either you were into indie or you're into like metal or grunge or something. But most people were like into indie. That was everyone's kind of indie phase, I feel.
Yeah, I share that. I think I'm not sure how universal it is, but also again, I think maybe to a certain extent a bit of a sort of northern small town, small city phenomenon, or just not even
probably
small.
Brought on by the Arctic Monkeys to an extent.
Yeah, it's all in the aftermath of that sort of what became known as the sort of landfill indie, I suppose, and that we just grew up in the sort of remnants of that, an era that's kind of been slagged off in many ways, and sometimes understandably, if I'm honest, but a lot of sort of fond memories involved in it anyway. And I liked a lot of that sort of dancey side to it, which is quite a common theme throughout it actually, like, you know, and that goes right back to the post-punk scene. I guess you call it like dance post-punk or funk post-punk, I don't know, but you know, the more modern equivalents include like Two Door Cinema Club or Block Party, Franz Ferdinand as well, all of those. Anyway, Girls and Boys is very much that. It's kind of like, and in some ways, the sort of ultimate poppiest, kind of catchiest embodiment of some of those tropes. And so it was interesting listening to that, back to that again. That was a bit of an aside. I think that gives some sense of my entrance into the album. Those two songs in particular, I'd say.
I wanted to jump off what you were saying about Girls and Boys being kind of very dance indie, and just kind of a point just to say is like part of like the introduction to the album is that I think it's important to go into understanding this is a very, very, very genre fluid album. This is what happens when you get somebody who decides that they don't want to just stick to one type of music and they're going to make an album that's full of everything. Almost every song feels like it's part of a different, not necessarily wholeheartedly diving in, but definitely dabbling with a different genre of music. So you do have like Boys and Girls, which is, like you say, quite a dancey, indie, poppy tune. And I think every song on the album is almost a quintessential pop song of the 90s. But it's interesting how you've got kind of synth pop in Girls and Boys, really, I feel. And then you've got something like Bank Holiday, which was fun to listen to on the Bank Holiday yesterday. But that's more of kind of a punk feeling song. And then you've got things like the Debt Collector, which is like an instrumental, like a waltz almost. So the album in that sense feels a little bit all over the place. But that feels like it has got negative connotation. So I like to use the term genre fluid, where it just kind of explores a little bit of everything. It's all over the place. And I think that's what makes it quite a exciting listen, because each track brings something new to the table and definitely grabs your attention from the get-go.
I think that really, really stands out about the album. It's also, I can't remember whether I touched upon this last week, it's also what I think makes Blur to me the better of the two. It's that they are just more interesting and they do more with what they've got.
Yeah, let's go ahead and make this statement right now.
I'm sticking by it.
Blur is better than Oasis. Yeah. If you didn't listen to last week's episode and catch it at the end, we are both Northerners who are # Team Blur. And I'm sorry, there's nothing you can do to change our minds.
I'll give it with the caveat that maybe I've just not been on as enough of a deep dive into Oasis. That is very possible. And it's not even that I dislike Oasis,
but
Oasis are the less.
Oh, fair, okay.
They're the less interesting of the two, basically, and I think that's a fair statement.
I think that's the thing. I've not done a deep dive of Oasis because every time I've tried, I've bounced off them because I don't find them interesting or enjoyable. You know?
Yeah. No,
I'll try, and then I just get 2 songs deep, and I'm like, I can't listen to this anymore.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna upset a lot of people with this this line of thinking.
I was potentially going to spiral into my hot take because it is related to the range of genres, but I can hold off for now. It's a bit of a messy hot take, and I'm not sure I even believe in it. But I can hold off.
I think that's fitting because we've said like it's a bit of a messy album in the genre fluid sense. So I think a messy hot take, jumping straight off it, would be very fitting, to be fair, if you want to go for it.
Sure. Well, it's all to do with at the end of history. And
oh wow.
I think I'm interested in that partly just because it's something that comes up in cultural criticism quite a lot. So I might have talked about Mark Fisher before. Mark Fisher have talked about this phenomenon of, I guess, musical development slowing down. So it would have once represented, for a little while in the 20th century, this radical sense of new possibilities and opportunities. So whether that be the sort of, jazz, free jazz, the punk movement, sort of jungle was one of the things he was really obsessed with. So in the early 90s. And then from about, I suppose, the 90s, maybe the late 90s, things just started to come to a sort of halt. At least nothing ever sort of seemed to have that sense of smack in your face, wow, this is what music can be, and give you that sort of visceral reaction of, no way, this isn't even music, like that reaction.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that immediately makes me feel like this hot take might not work is, even though I've always been really interested in that perspective, I'm really not sure it is necessarily true, as everybody's always very keen to point out. And it's kind of interesting because it does just start to make you think of, okay, but what would be the examples that are radical? And perhaps it is just the signs of somebody who's growing older, sort of having those sort of feelings of not regaining that sort of younger excitement, and then extrapolating.
Yeah.
Some of that may be true, but I think he touches upon something that does represent a broader cultural phenomenon. And it's interesting in the same way that there was this huge public interest in Fukuyama's The End of History. So with the fall of the Berlin Wall, it just felt like such a great way to encapsulate a cultural moment, a cultural psychology that has sort of gone on to exist right up to now, when suddenly everybody brought it back up again and everybody was like, oh no, it wasn't the end of history. Look what's happening. Russia's coming back, yada, yada, yada. Now that also kind of, that feels like it sort of misses the point of that argument, because I suppose that argument was never about the fact that history has actually ended, like no other events will ever happen. It was a conceptual argument. It was the fact that we have reached the greatest concept for how we should govern, and there may be other challenges, but none of them will ever be a true challenger in terms of its conceptual superiority. So the cultural state of, we're in this mindset of, we've reached everything that there is to reach. We have everything on the table. And so things might move about on the table, but everything is there on the table, I think arguably does still describe our times. So in that sense, we are in an end of history mindset, regardless of whether it is the end of history and all of that kind of stuff. Finally, this is where good old Damon Albarn comes into it. So I think that this album represents the beginning of that moment in music, is my hot take.
Okay.
So the album is produced entirely of all of these strands of music that are there laid out on the table for Damon Albarn to play with.
It's a musical creative milieu.
It's exactly that. So yeah, here Damon is with kind of everything presented and nothing new available. So all that's left really is to produce in a kind of self-conscious reflexivity, a kind of, an array of pastiche with a kind of knowing wink. And this is one of the things that Damon does really well, or the band does really well, is that it often has that knowing wink. I mean, so as well as like all the songs you kind of mentioned, and like it really is like a huge range. I was reading that there were supporter singles for the Parklife song that were like pastiches of jazz, and I've heard before that the later song 2 was essentially a parody of grunge. So there's clearly a bit of that art school brattiness where he enjoys kind of playing with genre and all that kind of stuff. But that's why it is such a distinctly modern, or perhaps postmodern, approach to music, because it's that no longer that sense of how can we radically dream up something new. It's given up on that dream. And instead, it's how can we play with what is here on the table.
Yeah.
And I think all of that links into that broader mindset that and this is what Mark Fisher says as well. It's that broader mindset of what else is out there? Well, nothing. This is, Mark Fisher calls it capitalist realism. It's that sense of this is just the way things are. And I'm also reading a book at the moment by David Graeber and David Wengrow, which I'm obsessed with, so I've just been finding any opportunity to bring up, so I'm bringing it up now. But called The Dawn of Everything, where they're trying to kind of like challenge that mindset that we found ourselves in, where we just kind of accept that this is the way of things. That's the rough hot take. I like it. I was I was sat here listening to the album earlier, and I was just like, this feels like an opportunity to talk about things that I can think about with music anyway.
Yeah.
So that Mark Fisher comment in particular just sort of comes up time and time again with the way I think about music sometimes, even though I don't fully agree with him. I just can't help it. It kind of got lodged in there. And so now felt like the time to address it. And my hot take is Blur is at the center and beginning of all of that era that we now still find ourselves in.
I like that. I can buy into that. And I think you've taken his kind of very negative take and kind of taken it to added a more interesting dynamic on it. And I think I can see, especially with Damon Albarn, because I think like what he does in this album and what he does a lot with Blur, and what he then continued to kind of carry over into Gorillaz, his other project, is this almost scavenger mindset.
Yeah, that's a good.
Which again has negative connotations, but like he'll take a little bit of this, a little bit of that. A lot of the time, it's like looking at the scene of what's popular or what has the potential to be popular, and he's very good at seeking out artists with like unique voices and seeking out other musicians to kind of work alongside with, especially in his Gorillaz projects. And I think that's kind of and then like creating things that are new and exciting and vibrant and interesting, but they are very much kind of patchworked or cobbled together from all these other genres and ideas. And he plays a lot with just such a variety of sounds. And I think that does originate from his time with Blur. And Parklife feels like almost like the proto stage for that. The fact that all these songs are all over the place in terms of genre and dynamic and sounds and instrumentation. And again, getting guest voices to star on and stuff like that. Like it's all this kind of early beginnings. And like when I say early beginnings, like this is all done incredibly well, in my opinion. I think all of these songs are memorable and singable and well made and well produced.
Some incredible choruses in there. Yeah.
But it does feel, the choruses are like proper catchy hooks that will stick in your brain for life. But it does feel like the origins of Damon Albarn's kind of playful mindset he has of scavenging genres and vibes and music and bringing them together. And in that sense, I guess I do quite buy into your theory that you've laid down, your hot take, that everything's on the table. But I think Damon has this talent. He has the eye to find the things on the table that work together and that are interesting and that can be played with. and sometimes they're parodied, and sometimes he's like, taking the piss, but sometimes they are like earnest recreations or his own twists on songs. So I don't want to go as far as to say Damon's never had like an original idea. I think all of these songs are original. It's just that they're based off pre-existing notions and genres and soundscapes that he then kind of like brings together. Again, like, synth pop or instrumental waltzes on punk music, and later when he goes into Gorillaz, that's very much kind of hip hop inspired. There's a lot of garage and jazz and grime and like all sorts of different genres. And just to quickly like touch back on a point I made earlier about this being a formative album for me, is it was formative in the sense that I listened to Blur and as a kid, and not by like choice. It was one of these albums that like my dad put on. Basically, my childhood memories of it are we were in Italy for a family holiday, and we'd hired a car and we'd drive everywhere to like go to, if we were going to the beach or whatever, we'd be driving around this hired car through the kind of like the hills of Italy. Pretty sure it was Italy. Could have been France, childhood memory being what it is, but pretty sure it was Italy. And I just associate that whole holiday with the Debt Collector and this album and this album in whole, because it's the days of CD players in cars, and we only had like 2 or 3 CDs, and one of those CDs was Parklife. And this album, and in particular the Debt Collector, playing as we were driving over through the rolling hills of Italy, is like stamped into my brain. And then it was kind of from there that I think like the first sprigs of musical interest started to grow, because I think I'd listened to music growing up. I'm going off on several tangents. I am going to kind of try and bring it round at some point. Listen to music growing up, but I remember there was like a solid chunk of my life where I didn't get music. I didn't really understand it, because I was listening to like McFly and stuff like that, and I was like, I don't really see what the big deal is, but I want to like be able to talk about it with my friends or whatever. And I feel like it was Parklife and Blur that really kind of started to tweak my curiosity and catch my ear, and left me with like memorable hooks and instrumentals and ways of doing songs that weren't just kind of poppy boy band, now that's what I call music. It was a little bit more interesting. And then that led to me finding Gorillaz, and Gorillaz are like my formative music experience proper. So not only was Blur Parklife potentially an origin for Damon Albarn's kind of experimental scavenging, it was also the origin and like the proto phase for my experimental scavenging, because I went from Blur to Gorillaz, and then from Gorillaz, I'm pretty sure that's what got me into like my favorite kind of genres of music. So that's kind of my very long-winded tangent, spouting off your idea of all the cards being on the table.
Well, first of all, that was actually really lovely. I don't know why, but that put a real smile on my face, just sort of imagining young Louis in Italy or France or wherever it was, having that spark of interest and joy listening to this album. I don't know. I just think that's a really, really lovely image. And also, yeah, I'm glad you touched upon then how that linked to Gorillaz, because I was assuming that must link in somewhere. But what's interesting about that is that I remember, I think I must have known of each of them separately, and I can't remember when it would have been, but I remember finding out that Gorillaz was Damon Albarn, and just sort of marrying those in my head was such a surreal experience. But presumably you never kind of went through that. Did it seem natural, or did it still seem surprising when you came to Gorillaz and you were like, wow, this just seems totally different?
I think like the aspect of it, because it is a completely different band and experience, and I definitely bought into the kind of the animated band members, definitely initially. So in that sense, I feel like I've got 2 versions of Gorillaz in my head. I've got the version that is like 2D
Sure.
Murdoch,
Okay. Yeah.
Noodles, and Russell. But I also have the idea of and a greater appreciation for Gorillaz as Damon Albarn's band and project. So I think I kind of buy into the fantasy of it and the story and the narrative and the world. And I really enjoy that aspect. And I think the art and all that side of it is fantastic. Jamie's art, I can't remember his last name. Jamie Hewitt, I think it is, maybe. But maybe I'll come back and edit in his actual last name. Jamie Hewlett. But I wasn't like necessarily completely blown away. I didn't have like that revelation moment because I think I did come to Gorillaz through Blur.
Sure.
Not necessarily directly. Like I don't think I ever like looked up, whoa, what else is Blur? Because I feel like you don't really do that very often. It's like you kind of assume, especially when you're younger, you kind of assume, oh, this is the band and this is what they do. They don't do anything else because this is just, their thing. But I don't think there was a specific moment I transitioned from Blur to Gorillaz or like found the Damon Albarn narrative. But I also don't think I was ever like mind blown to find out it was the same thing. I feel like they probably came up alongside each other enough in my kind of formative music years that I was kind of like, okay, I can see the Damon Albarn fingers at play here across both worlds.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like now in retrospect, I over time I've just come to see similarities, and like we've just been talking about, there's a very similar scavenger. I'll use that term because I like it. Scavenger approach, I suppose, to each of them, and even like now I can kind of hear that even some of the vocals are sort of similar. But yeah, it did surprise me the first time. I feel like also it's just interesting noting another Gorillaz link, I suppose. Well, related to exactly that actually. So maybe I'm just saying the same thing twice, but in slightly different ways. But is that like? No, I think that there is one more thing to add to it. So as well as Gorillaz having sort of taken or sort of carried on the mantle of that approach, that sort of scavenger approach. In addition, there's an extra element of borrowing from tropes of what it is to be a rock band or what it is to be stars. And so it's interesting that you were saying that part of the appeal, or sort of certainly part of what you got into, was the whole virtual band. That's what all of that is. It's kind of doing what Damon Albarn was already doing musically, but on a meta level. It's playing upon the history of stardom, I suppose. So it does feel as though it is a continuation of the project in multiple ways.
I feel like I don't want to stoke the Oasis Blur fire again too much, but I think another reason why I prefer Blur as a band is I feel like through this kind of playing with ideas and playing with the idea, like the concepts of being, what does it mean to be a rock band or a pop band or a boy band, etc. It always felt like it was through a bit of like a layer of scrutiny and irony and playfulness and a nod and a wink with Damon Albarn and the boys, whereas Oasis just felt hell-bent on being just
dickheads.
Yeah. Like the epitome. It was like what it's like what Blur and Gorillaz were trying to kind of mock up and like pretend to be and play at being with a nod and a wink was what Oasis genuinely just were, just so full of themselves and unbearable. Blur was just the more fun band of the two. Oasis just took themselves far too seriously. The Gallaghers still take themselves far too seriously, despite the fact that they're now has-beens. That's another hot take.
No, I agree, and actually just to just because now that I've thrown into the open, I feel married to it, even if I don't actually agree with it. Just to sort of bring that back to the vaguely end of history stuff. It's like two different responses to that moment, and one is just to embrace it without any scrutiny, which feels small c conservative, and one is to sort of embrace it because you have no other choice. The table has been laid, but constantly critique and sort of review it, which is what Blur chose to do, I suppose. And I think that feels, if you were to make it political, just that little bit more radical. It feels like it's saying, okay, but how did we get to this point, or what, you know, what does this say about us if this is the point we're at? I think that's overreading, but I just thought I might as well.
We love a little bit of an overread.
Throw it in there,
Well,
because like I say, I'm now wedded to this.
I love the implication of Oasis as conservative with a small c.
Yeah, I also thought that would sound kind of quite provocative. So
yeah, that's a good little like statement. You know, we can print that out and put on a t-shirt.
Not saying that they're Tories. That's a key point.
No, it's with a small c.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to move into discussing. I feel like we've hit on Blur, we've hit on Damon Albarn, we've talked about a completely different band, Gorillaz. I think I'm going to talk about this album and my kind of re-listens over the weekend and what it kind of made me think of, and then the weird little spin-off dive that it kind of led me to do, which will lead back to Hugh Grant and Notting Hill.
Amazing. Okay,
so bear with me.
God, it is a full-on episode of hot takes and weird meandering stories, isn't it? I'm loving this.
This is the kind of album that brings off complete tangents, hot takes, and juicy conversation, and it's perfect. And but everything, like the album itself, genre-wise, everything's a little bit disjointed, so you're just gonna have to bear with us and come along for the ride as we tangentially go off on things. I feel like for me, and I felt this definitely like listening back to it, is Parklife is like an enduring classic of British and Englishness of the 90s. It has kind of this sense of cheekiness and optimism, but with this kind of backdrop of like a grey and drab world. And what I mean by that is this is something that I've kind of been thinking about with that kind of only exists with the English music, and I think it exists for every other culture, but to them is a kind of a sound that exists with music made in your own country that kind of captures the mood and the dynamic of your sense as a nation. So I feel like that's a little bit floaty, but bear with me. So like for me, and this is not a genre like locked to any genre or anything. It's not specifically like, oh, punk rock music or grime music or any particular like one kind of English originating genre. Like this can be any genre of music, any kind of type of vocalist, any type of instrument. It just captures a certain sound and a certain energy that kind of fills me up with this feeling. And for me, an English album is one that kind of either conjures up or instills upon this kind of, it creates this world. The setting of England is dull and a bit depressing and a bit grey. It's the tower blocks of London, you know. It's the council houses. It's the weak economy. It's the Conservative government. But it's then an album that shines through with these kind of glimpses of cheekiness and optimism and a little bit of rowdiness, and it invokes pints at the pub and being shit at football, but camaraderie over these kind of things. So it kind of captures simultaneously the fact that, yeah, England can be a bit of a shit place to live, But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of fun to be had, and there's these own little quirks and charms to the country. And I think Parklife for me really captures the charm of Englishness that I think only an Englishman can feel listening to this album. I don't know if anything I just said made any sense whatsoever.
I love all of that, and I actually love that I think you've acknowledged something there that actually goes slightly against the standard orthodox view, but in an entirely correct way, I think, which is that it isn't just purely self-deprecating. When we're self-deprecating, it isn't just self-deprecating. I think there's a joy in that. There's a kind of resilience in that. I think there's a little bit of love in that, in the same way that when we bully our mates, that's an act of love. I think when we bully ourselves and when we bully our country, it's a sort of act of self-love. And I think
definitely.
You've touched upon that there. It isn't purely depressing. It isn't purely drab. There's a little bit of optimism there, and maybe this album in particular, because it was part of that sort of Britpop wave, the sort of Cool Britannia, all of that optimism. You know, Blair coming in just a few years later, and you know, you can have a British flag and it all seems cool and groovy.
Yeah.
So to some extent, maybe that is a certain era in time where that optimism is more acceptable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think maybe we still retain that sometimes. It's not always purely critical.
I think the Cool Britannia phase is such an interesting phase of music. I think, first of all, the name Cool Britannia is one of those things that's so aggressively 90s that it couldn't work in any other context. And it's not really cool, but it goes so far around the horseshoe of coolness that it kind of comes back around from being cringe to being kind of retro 90s cool again. Because Cool Britannia is like pretty weak as a name, and yet it has a charm to it. But like you say, it is that sense of increased pride and optimism in the culture of the UK. And that's why I was going to mention Hugh Grant and Notting Hill and all that kind of stuff, because it was Blur, it was Oasis, it was Spice Girls, and importantly, it was this monumental steamroll of British rom-coms that just flourished in the 90s and captured this sense of British, like, quirkiness and charm set in these really fucking drab environments of the UK. Like you had Notting Hill, you had 4 weddings and a funeral, you had like all of, and you know, Hugh Grant was in basically all of them as the lovable posh boy. But About a Boy was that 90s probably, and they all had the same color palette, and they all had the same actors in them. But yeah, like the early noughties was almost the hangover of the 90s rom-com bombastic.
Big shout out actually to About a Boy for feeling a little bit, as I remember it, a little bit more gritty. I mean, Hugh Grant still plays a token posh bloke, but he's also a posh bloke who's unemployed and kind of has lost a sense of purpose and meaning, and you know, sort of meets single mothers in slightly deceptive circumstances. Yeah, I remember really liking About a Boy, and it does feel like it's a little bit grittier than perhaps even though I like the Richard Curtis films, like you know, like 4 Weddings and all of that. It's a slightly sanitized view of Britain, perhaps.
I think there's something inherently comfortable about, and like comfortable and comforting. I think for people at the time watching those movies and listening to this music, and now for like us revisiting, I think a lot of us, like people our age, grew up with those films and with these songs, and there is something comforting about revisiting them, because you do feel kind of something stirring in you about the optimism of the time. Like it leaks over, because right now is a very pessimistic time, understandably. Things are not going particularly well globally or in this country. So it's nice to kind of tap into the 90s when it was all, you know, as things go, pretty tickety boo for like tickety boo as a 90s. I think that's a 90s thing to say. Maybe it's like an 1890s thing to say, to be fair. But it was all pretty it was all pretty like you say, groovy in the 90s. You know, you could wear a Union Jack and like feel cool and not just feel kind of a bit weird wearing a flag. And yeah, it's that energy that the Romcoms brought into, and it's the energy that Blur and Parklife in particular really sell. I think like something I wrote down was that not only is this a genre fluid album where it's going all over the place musically, but it also feels a bit, in terms of like story wise, it is a concept album, I think, but rather than it being one continuous tale of love and loss, or I don't know, whatever else, it feels a little bit like an anthology. It feels a little bit like you're walking around the central square of an English soap, like EastEnders, but you know, not EastEnders. A soap called Parklife, and you're peering in through all the windows, and you're getting a peek of all these different stories playing out, and they're all very different, but they're all very English. And I think that's what kind of the album feels like, is a little bit of a Netflix series based in 90s Britain with all these crazy extravagant stories playing out, but all still very kind of grounded.
It's like kitchen sink pop, isn't it? It's I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
And in a way, the titular track Parklife feels like that's the song where you are kind of walking around, having a peer through all the other songs in their windows, having a nosy.
It feels appropriate that the album's named after it, doesn't it? You're right. It thematically and musically, on every level, really just seems to capture the spirit of the album. God, I feel like we've been we've covered all sorts of the cult, and we've covered the very personal aspect, I feel, in this. I don't want to blow our own trumpet, but I feel like this is what we have to offer. It's you know,
this has been a very full representation of every tangent known to possibly affect this tangent-full podcast.
We can do the range, you know. It's cultural commentary and introspective. What's introvert and extrovert? Yeah, so introverted.
Introspective and extrospective.
Yeah, extrospective doesn't work, does it? That's what I was trying to work out. Let's say extrospective.
Maybe it's a thing. Yeah. If it doesn't work, we can be like Shakespeare and make our own work.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, when did that stop being allowed? He got away with it. Right, yeah. So introspective and extrospective. Louis and Ronan. More of something else entirely.
Sorry, this is another tangent. Again, just because, I don't know, it's hard to flow ideas together between this album, but we'll move on to discussing particular songs. So there's my kind of introduction to the new section. I just wanted to very quickly say about one of them, and you might want to have it up ready to. I don't know how good your memory on this is, but Trouble in the Message Center. The opening of it reminds me of there's a song in Peep Show that one of Hans's bands does, that Dobby and her boyfriend dance to really badly, and then he's like, "Oh, I thought you were dancing ironically."
Right, okay.
And the song, like, just to capture even more of that sense of Britishness, you know? Peep Show is an inherently British show, taking the piss out of many aspects of Britishness, Englishness. Yeah, I don't know why the opening of Trouble in Message Center just very strongly reminds me of, like, I don't know what the song's actually called, but I know one of the lyrics is "I am in loco parentis." So if anyone else knows that reference, shout out to that. But yeah, other than that,
I don't remember the reference, which is making me feel like I'm a fake fan. I'm gonna have to dig it up afterwards, or you'll have to send me it. But I see exactly what you mean. It feels like a connector there between two different hallmarks of British culture.
Do you have any favorite tracks? I presume Girls and Boys and Parklife are two of your favorites. Was there any others that stood out?
Yeah, I'd have to go for those because they are just incredible pop tunes. And I've got to say that just listening this time, I was just struck by how incredible that chorus or hook in End of the Century is.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
not that I'd be able to remember it off by heart, but just I kept on re-listening to it just to hear it again, which it's been a little while since I've actually had a when a chorus just really hooks you like that.
I've noticed you've added it to your I've come to join a knitting circle playlist.
Yes, yeah, I have. Quick aside, that is a quote from a dry cleaning song, so that just links back to our conversation.
Nice. Oh, it's all connected. This is such an interconnected episode. It's great.
But yeah, they'd be mine, I suppose. That or Magic America, which I'm pretty sure I remember hearing from my childhood. I don't know whether my dad must have played it or sang it, or I don't know. But yeah,
it's still a locked away memory.
Yeah, it did. I can't pinpoint exactly.
I think my favourite songs, obviously Parklife is everyone's favourite song of this album. I want to claim it as well. It is just so iconic, and you just want to bop to it, bouncing along and sing it aloud. I think everybody knows it pretty much word for word. I do know one of my friends used to find it really annoying, and I pity them. But other than that, I think everyone loves it. I think their reason for disliking it was because it was, again, it's a bit unfair. I don't know if they've changed their mind on it now, but back in the day they didn't like it because it wasn't singing. It was like talk singing.
Oh wow, okay.
And they found that confusing. I think they've probably grown past that at this point. But the Debt Collector holds a very special place in my heart because of its ties to my kind of childhood holiday trip nostalgia, and I also love it because it's just so different to everything else on the album, and it will definitely catch you unawares going in. I feel like if you go in completely blind and you're just working your way through all these tracks, and then you hit what is essentially an instrumental waltz, I just kind of love the boldness of including it and just being like, yep, this is what we're doing. And I think I will also pick, God, they're all good. I think Tracy Jacks as well, just because of how catchy the hook is. Tracy Jacks, it's an earworm. But definitely, as always, they're all well worth a listen. Cool. I had a look at some reviews for the Tainted Takes.
Oh, phew.
Section.
Okay, phew. I thought you were missing out the. Sorry, I panicked then. I thought you were missing out the sting for the quiz, but I forgot about Tainted Takes. That's okay.
Oh, no, I'm coming back to the quiz. I just wanted to touch on the fact that I did look at some Tainted Takes.
Sure.
And most of them were just from very bitter Oasis fans. So they were not particularly interesting takes. They were just like, this album isn't as good as blah, 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 boring Oasis album, blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
I love how we've just done the same back to them, though. I'm not sure we're any better.
Yeah, well, doubling down on it. We're no better than them. We never claim to be, though. We're just on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, and that's what makes us better than them.
Exactly. So it is now time for the quiz. Do.
Beautiful.
Welcome, Ronan.
Beautiful.
To the... How are you doing today? Are you ready? Are you excited?
I'm prepped. I feel like, I'm not sure, but I might be a little bit behind you. So...
What are you going to do with your winnings?
I feel like I should say end world hunger, but nah, probably just...
It's only a $5, so pay off some bills.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't go far towards the bills. It'd probably be easier to pay off the world hunger, to be honest.
One small step.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't even get a takeaway with that. Being a bit stingy. I can't even get a pint in London now. So I can get a pint at my local.
Okay, so this week's quiz, as you could probably have guessed, the questions are going to be based around parks.
Amazing.
And life.
Life feels quite broad.
So it was very broad. So I only picked 2 questions covering life. We have 4 questions total.
Okay.
Because I had a feeling this is going to be a long-running one. So we're going to start off with, what is the UK's biggest national park?
Ooh. It's got to be the Lake District. Is it not the Lake District? Oh, no, wait. Oh, bloody hell. Yeah, I'll just go with the Lake District.
It's the Cairngorms.
Oh, you know what? That's what I was going to say as well. I should have... I can't say I should have trusted intuition then. 'cause
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
It was actually, yeah, it's the opposite. I shouldn't have trusted my original intuition. I should have gone with...
Gone with the secondary gut feeling.
Yeah, but
No
I think
points so
the
far.
secondary thing wasn't a gut feeling. I think that was... Oh, that goes opposite to...
What actual logic?
Yeah, normally everybody says to trust your intuition. It's okay. That's disappointing.
According to Brian Tomasic, what is the estimated number of living individual animals on Earth?
Bloody hell.
This is a life question.
Yeah.
You're not able to pass where this came from.
Who on earth's Andrew Tominic?
I don't know who Andrew Tominic is, but Brian Tomasic
Oh yeah, that's
is some kind of mathematician.
the one. Well, what do mathematicians know about it? That's...
Well, I'm sure he has other credentials, but I'll be real with you. I very much skim read the article.
Okay, no, it's all right. I'm just trying to challenge it now before I get it wrong. I'm gonna go for
the thing is,
a trillion.
it's such
I'm
like
gonna say a
a
trillion.
large number. A trillion.
Is it including insects
Trillion.
as well? Just out of interest.
It's including every individual animal. So that's insects, people, donkeys.
Okay,
The
I'm gonna go
whole
for
shebang.
122 trillion.
You were so far off,
Oh no.
but in an understandable way, only because of the scale of the numbers we're talking about. 20 quintillion,
Bloody hell.
or in other terms, 20 billion.
Wow.
So quite a lot.
Oof. I didn't even know quintillion was a thing. So
A fair whack.
yeah, fair whack.
Yeah.
Do that. That's a good fact though.
Here's one that you should get actually.
Oh bloody hell. Okay.
So yeah, this is one that I expect you as a Londoner to know.
Okay.
Just inherently, you will have answered this question in order to move there, I assume. What percentage of London consists of green space?
Oh, I have no idea, Louis. London is a very green city. I'll give it that.
It is. Do you want a fact?
Yeah.
London is the third greenest capital city in the world.
Oh wow. Yeah, you know what, that almost doesn't surprise me. I'm now curious to know what the others are. Do you have that to hand?
No, no. That's
Disappointing.
homework for the listeners to look up and for you to look up separately.
All right, I'm gonna go
I
with
can do a quick Google while you're thinking of
15%.
percentage.
15% is what I'm going with.
15.
Oh, bloody hell. Okay, don't do it like that. 10%. No, I'm sticking with 15%. Yeah, bloody hell.
So, including private gardens,
Oh.
it's...
Okay, yeah, well, it's too late now, but yeah, okay.
You want the one including or not including private gardens?
Yeah, go with not including to begin with.
Not including...
So just parks and that.
37%.
What? Really? Bloody hell.
Yeah. Including 47%.
Whoa! No wonder it's one of the greenest cities. That's not doing bad.
What are the greenest capital cities? Watch me get a list that has. This is just giving me what are like the, most.
Oh yeah, environmentally friendly. Nobody wants that.
Environmentally
Yawn.
friendly cities. That's not what I want. Boring.
Yeah,
Lame.
The planet.
We'll just move on.
Okay, right. I'll look it up after.
Okay. This one, you might have a better chance of getting. But I said that about the last one.
Yeah, don't.
I didn't
keep
actually
taunting me
expect
like
you to
this.
know the last one. It was just a London-based one. Yeah. This is we've done 2 parks. We've done 1 life question, so we're ending up on a life question. What is the average life expectancy in the UK? I will accept either the combined average life expectancy, or just the men's, or just the women's.
It's 82 in it.
But you got to tell me which one you're answering.
Oh, what? Oh, That's a bit of a catch.
You can't just say a number and then like.
Okay, I'm gonna go for the average is 80. 80. Oh, I'm gonna go for 81. Like, sorry, that's
81.
That's
And
across
that's for
two.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I'll give it to you, and I would have given you 82 because it's 81.77 for both.
Amazing.
So I'll give you that point.
Oh, thank you. That's well, I didn't need to deliberate so much because the only other thing I was gonna say was 80. So that's
80.
quite well.
If you're curious, for men it is 80.22, and for women it is 83.28.
Okay, interesting. I'm glad I didn't go for men. I think I'd have maybe said 79 for men. Did it used to be 79 recently? I feel like I remember it being in the 70s.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's like crawled up by a little bit recently, but it could have equally crawled down. I'm not sure. I also don't know how recent these statistics are, so take it all with a pinch of salt, as with every quiz episode. But yeah, that is the quiz.
Amazing.
One more thing I'd like to touch on before we do our roundup is we actually received some fan mail.
Oh wow! Bloody hell.
Last.
Sorry, I keep on just responding "wow, bloody hell" to everything. I'm realizing, but it's just been an amazing last 5 minutes.
Put it on a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Wow, bloody hell. So we received some fan mail from your mum, actually.
Oh no. Right. Okay.
Which was very, very, very wholesome.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I take back
unexpected.
the no. That's not the response I wanted.
No.
Yay.
No, I checked the email just on a whim. Wasn't expecting any actual emails, but if you do want to email in, it's more of something else entirely at gmail.com, and your message will be read out to some extent on the show. But your mum just wanted to say that she thinks the podcast is brilliant. She's not at all biased, but she genuinely found the sessions both informative and entertaining. And yeah, she just basically said, I'll send you a screenshot of it proper. I was going to send you it straight away, and I was like, you know, I'll save it for the show to get a genuine reaction of you going, "Oh no."
Yeah, that's a very pleasant surprise. That's lovely. Thanks, Mum. I'm sure it's not biased at all. That's and I'm glad that you clarified that.
She said, P.S. The enthusiasm with which you both described the albums in sessions 3 and 4 was such that we had to give them both a listen. So thank you for the introduction. I particularly enjoyed Chinatown Slalom. Honestly, not biased.
Oh, lovely.
But
what was wrong with the first two? That's what I want to
know. We just weren't as enthusiastic, I guess. But thank you very much for the email, and I'm glad you're enjoying, and I hope you enjoyed this one as well, and any future ones if you continue to listen. Yeah, so in terms of the next episode, it will be a mini-sode that we'll try and record at some point before I go away, I think, is the plan. And then in terms of the episode after that, I will try and get some guests on.
Sounds great to me. I think it's about time. I think we're ready for it.
On that, thank you very much for joining me once again. Thank you all for listening. I hope you go off and listen to the chaotic British album that is Parklife and enjoy it as much as we have. You can find us on all your favorite podcast listening services, as well as on youtube.com. We also have an email address, as mentioned previously, which is moreofsomethingelseentirely@gmail.com, and an Instagram, which is @moreofsomethingelseentirely. Still kind of figuring out what to do with that, but we'll get there. All the links and links to things we've talked about and timestamps will all be in the description of this episode. And yeah, thanks for listening. And we'll catch you for a mini-sode, and then on the flippity flop. Bye-bye.
And the flappity flap.
And the flappity
And the flip. Yeah, actually, I can't really think of it more than that. But yeah. Bye, guys.
And the capitalists proffer napalm and money in green suitcases to the naked. And the communists create heavy industry. But the heart is also heavy.